The ball's in your court. Yes?
I had this question. I was reading Pirkei Avot, and I was wondering if there's any significance as to why each chapter starts with the saying, Kol Yisrael Yeshem Chelek Ve'olam Haba.
It doesn't. We say it, but it's really just a quotation from another Mishnah elsewhere in a different tractate, and it's an introduction to learning Pirkei Avos. It's not in the text of Pirkei Avos. Yeah.
What was like your biggest regret of your whole life?
Well, first,
and why?
Yeah. First of all, my oldest son said something to me which I found challenging at the time. He said, "Everyone dies with regrets." So I thought, well, let's see. If I think of the great people of the world, not sure what Abraham's regrets would have been, but Isaac, having as one of his two sons, the most important pillar of evil in the world, that's something which one could have negative feelings about. And Jacob, the way he interacted with his children, and something he said to his wife, and so forth and so on, were definitely things that were wrong and that he must have regretted. Moses, not going into the land of Israel because of a certain mistake that he made. So I thought to myself, well, maybe that's true, you know. It's very hard to find a life without failure. And failure will cause a person to feel regret, a healthy person anyway. And for a while, I was sort of stuck in a position where I'm thinking of it as a feeling of sadness and failure because regret is something that I did wrong. But recently, maybe a couple of years ago, it occurred to me that maybe I was conceptualizing it the wrong way. Because when someone does something wrong, I'm talking now about a deliberate mistake, deliberate transgression, the way that you fix it is by doing tshuva. One of the elements in tshuva is regret. So the regret is not only healthy, the regret is part of the repair. So now you have a verse that says, Ein Adam tzadik ba'oretz asher yas tov lo yechta. And yes, the word Adam is there for the aficionados. There's no person righteous who gets through the world doing good and doesn't fail. So failure in some sense, and the Maharal talks about this at great length, failure in some sense is built into the way life is set up. But regret is a tremendous success. Being regretful is a success. It means taking responsibility for what you did, looking it square in the face, not rationalizing it. And with a resolve not to repeat the mistake in the future, and with confession to God, then you've repaired yourself. So the regret can be in itself something that brings you joy, not something with a sense of sadness and sense of failure. On the contrary, I confronted the failure and I looked it straight in the face and I did what needed to be done and I fixed it. So that changed my whole attitude towards it. And of course, everything that HaKadosh Baruch Hu does, he does out of loving kindness. That's one of our principal axioms. So the idea of regret as a gift to a person, utterly different from the standard English motto, the way to hell is paved with regrets. That's not devastating. That's not depressing. On the contrary, that's elevating. That's ennobling. It shows that you maintained your standards, you didn't rationalize, and in our terms, that you actually fixed it. Now, we talk about biggest. I have a lot of trouble with questions like that. I'm sometimes asked, what's the best thing that happened to you on Shabbos? Or what's the best thing that happened on the trip? But the trouble is that things aren't in a simple ordering of more and less. there was more excitement here, but more satisfaction there. To measure them in that way, I don't think is an easy thing to do. But I think it's healthy to have regrets. If you didn't have regrets, well, there are only two possibilities. Either you're perfect, which is probably unlikely, or you're masking these things from yourself. You're not taking responsibility. You're not looking at them squarely, and that's tragic. That's what's tragic. So, what are some of the things that I regret? Certain interpersonal things, certain relationships that I handle in a way which, well, the ones that I couldn't have known better at the time, I feel much less regret for, I feel much less responsibility for. But there were times when I made decisions, and I had some consciousness of what the consequences would be, and I didn't do the thing that needed to be done. That in interpersonal relations, that's something which you think later, and the other person may have taken it badly. So then, I'm responsible for the consequences. So that's the kind of regret which I do feel very strongly. Yeah.
How did you go about making amends?
So sometimes I did, and sometimes it wasn't possible because either the person was. There are two things. So I'll give you this is a very interesting halacha. So let's suppose you do something to somebody. Let's take an extreme case. You do something, and it's anonymous. He doesn't know who did it. Now, one of the things you're supposed to do, and it hurts him, you stole something from somebody, and he doesn't know that you stole it. So one of the things you're supposed to do is apologize, and apologize for the hurt, and so on and so on. But suppose he'll be more hurt by the fact that it's you who did it than the original action was. So by telling him that you did it, you're going to hurt him more. Then it's very tricky. I was told this by a therapist once, that sometimes when A victimized B, A uses his apology to B to fuel A's own therapy, to fuel A's own sense of putting it past him. And that's a double victimization. So you have to be very, very careful with these things. So it's not always possible to amend it. So these are things which are very tricky and very difficult. And of course, people face challenges, and it's quite normal to fail at challenges. And then the real challenges, the real thing you want to hold on to is, you've probably heard this buzzword, cognitive dissonance, where, oh my gosh, if that's true, I'm going to be in trouble. Like Sinai, if there really was a revelation of Sinai, I've got to cancel my scuba diving plans for Saturday. So there must be something wrong with Sinai. They're all lying, or it was all hallucinations, and I can keep going. I can keep scuba diving. This dissonance between what I learn and what I want to do, and I see a contradiction, and now how am I going to face the contradiction? And the corrupt way is to corrupt your intellect and say, no, it's not right. I'm sure there are excuses. It's all a mistake. It's all by accident, and I don't have to worry about how I change. That you want to hold on to your objectivity. You want to hold on to your perception of truth, and then either overcome the resistance or live with the dissonance, live with the fact that I'm not perfect. I'm not living up to what I should live up to. That's, I think, where the spiritual challenge lies. Yes.
So going back to the races, why was Shem not given the title of being Jewish, or like more, I guess, credit? If we know, like, he had just Shiva and he thought like Jacob.
When I'm not getting the words. When was what?
Shem was had a yeshiva, right?
Shem had a yeshiva, yeah.
Yeah. Why was he given like a title of Jewish, or like more, I guess?
When was he adult Jewish?
Why don't we give him like a title of being Jewish? Like why don't we
give him the title of being Jewish? Okay, so this is actually discussed, and there are two opinions. What does it mean to be Jewish? Well, there are certain facts that apply to people who are Jewish and don't apply to people who aren't Jewish. Even before the giving of the Torah, and there's a difference of opinion, whether those of us in the Abrahamic family count as Jewish beforehand or not? Here's a very simple difference. How were you born Jewish? Through your mother or through your father?
Father.
Well, since the Torah was given, it's through your mother and only your mother. Father doesn't count. All other nations are identified by the father. And there's a difference of opinion as to how it was for Abraham and his descendants, whether it was through the mother or through the father. Did they have that criterion of Jewish identity before they received the Torah, or didn't they? Did the criterion of the receiving of the Torah create people being Jewish, or did it simply add to the Judaism that they had before, which was incomplete? So these are two views as to how you should look at them. But I think this is a sort of technical, legal issue. The truth is, anyone who believed in the Creator and lived up to the laws that God revealed for the population before the giving of the Torah counts as a successful person in terms of God's purpose of the world. So whether you give them the title JEW or don't give them the title JDW is not really so crucially important. And after all, if Shem didn't have it, then Abraham didn't have it either. Isaac didn't have it either. And they are the pillars of the whole world. So this issue, whether you call them Jewish or not call them Jewish, I don't think of as an important issue. The question was, how did you deal with what you had? How did you live with the opportunities that were open to you? And Abraham and his descendants were in a different quality of existence than people who were worshiping idols or polytheists or atheists. It's just a different quality of existence. Yeah.
How do you reckon that we have something called the Yeridat door? So the doors that we're basically living in now wouldn't be a high level as doors of past, but yet in other doors, like they killed prophets. Like I think Isaiah was killed by Jews.
No, Isaiah wasn't killed by Jews, but Zechariah was killed by Jews.
Many prophets were killed. And
Yeah.
then we say Yeridat door.
Okay, so this is a very important question. The words that he's using are the descent of the generations. There's something that's deteriorating over time. But of course the question is, what exactly is it that's deteriorating? And we know for sure that it is not the general level of observance. That's not what's deteriorating, because we have on record certain generations that were enormously superior to preceding generations. So it's not that. So then the question is what it is. And there is some discussion, and I don't think I'm aware of all the different options. But one is that the very greatest scholars in the generation become more and more inferior. But that's all. General scholarship could be more in a later generation. General practice could be more in a later generation. That's ups and downs. But the very greatest scholars become less. Yeah.
After Hitler died, what happened to his soul?
I'm sorry?
After Hitler died, what happened to his soul?
After Hitler died, what happened to his soul? I don't know. I hope you're not surprised to hear that I don't know. But I will give you one thing to think about. How qualified are we to judge the moral and spiritual stature of an agent, of a person, of a soul? So there's a very famous statement in the Mishnah Torah of the Rambam where he says, the Torah judges a person by the majority of his performance. Those of you who know me, I was trained in philosophy and mathematics, so I'm choosing my words very carefully. The majority of his performance. I didn't say actions, I said performance. I used that word on purpose. But, says the Rambam, the majority isn't calculated by simply identifying each action and counting them up. How many good actions, how many bad actions. That's not how it's done. And the reason that that's not how it's done is because one good action could outweigh many bad actions and vice versa. One bad action could outweigh many good actions. Actions have unequal size of moral and spiritual importance. Now, he says, the only one who can calculate this is Kel Deos. Kel Deos is a title for God, and it's used in a poignant passage in the prophecy of Hannah, after she had her first son, only son, Samuel, the prophet. She had a co-wife named Penina who made her life miserable. And the question was, what is Penina's motivation? Did she feel that by criticizing and embarrassing Hannah, she was trying to push her to become better? Or was she acting out jealousy because the husband treated Hannah better than he treated Penina? What was exactly going on? And Hannah's prophecy says, only Kel Deos knows. Only God, who is the God of the character of the person. Deos are character traits. That's the Rambam's Hilchos Deos, is how to build your character. He alone can judge what her motivation was. Now, in this passage, the Rambam says, we can't judge other people's moral and spiritual condition. Only Kel Deos can do that. That means that what the agent's moral and spiritual condition is depends upon the intricacies of his personal psychology, which no other human being can know. So we look from the outside. We only see the person's actions, and we can identify them legally in terms of their consequences. But that doesn't tell us what kind of responsibility he has for his actions. And this is brought out, again, almost very dramatically. God says to Samuel the prophet, I want you to go to Yishai, and I want you to anoint one of his sons to be king. Yishai is David's father. So Samuel goes to Yishai and says, get your sons together. God wants one of them to be king. So he calls together. Now, there's a whole sub-story here that he didn't regard David as one of his sons for a certain reason. He had 6 sons other than David. He called them all together. And Yishai takes a look at the oldest one. Samuel takes a look at the oldest one. He's very impressed. Very impressed. And he thinks, this certainly must be the one that God has in mind, that he should be king. God says to him, totally not. Totally not. Nim'asti, I'm disgusted by him. Now here's the prophet looking. Samuel is compared to Moses and Aaron. And he's looking, and God says to him, you don't see. Hashem, Adam yir le'einaim, a person looks with his eyes. Hashem yir le'leva, only Hashem sees the heart. You don't see the heart. The prophet who's compared to Moses and Aaron, he can't see the heart. No, that's true. We certainly can't see the heart. So for anyone, whether his external performance is terribly negative, or frankly, if his external performance is tremendously positive, we can't see the person behind the performance. So we have to admit our blindness and simply say that we don't know, we can't evaluate. So I think your question is motivated by the assumption, oh man, he really deserves it. He really must be evil. But what I'm speaking to is your presumption in asking the question, that maybe the presumption is something that we should be cautious about and not take as if we understood.
Can I ask something?
Yeah, sure.
Is there an explanation as to how all the races originated from just 2 people, Adam and Chava?
I don't think that we have an explanation, but I will point out that I don't think I'm going to speak things that are true but sound prejudicial. I don't think that we have a biological explanation either. What passes for a biological explanation is it could have happened this way. It could have happened this way. We could make up a story and explain it this way. That's not evidence. That's a story. Making up a story is the defensive move. You can't rule out evolution because we could make up a story how evolution could do it. That's not worthless, but it's not the same as giving an explanation. Then you'd have to see the mutations one by one and check it against the environment and see that it produced differential survival. No one has done that. And the other thing to know is that the same set of genes can express itself differently in different environments. So, and because of epigenetics, your environment and your personal experience can affect what genes will be expressed in your progeny. Maybe you can't change the DNA, even that's under attack now. But even if you can't change the DNA, but if you change the epigenetics, then the effects of the DNA in the next generation can be changed by what happens to you in your generation. Because the masking and accelerating factors, which are epigenetic, can be passed down from one to the next. Indeed, very recently I saw an article that the sperm, from the time that it's created to the time it's ejected, goes through a long tube, takes maybe up 2 weeks, and during those 2 weeks, it picks up masking from the father. So the traits in the father's life can be passed on to the next generation. Wow, shades of Lamarck. Well, Darwin wasn't everything. So I think that the pretense of, it's all evolution, most of the time that's, you can't prove it wrong because I can make up a story. It's not, we know, we can show you how it happened. And you have to be very, very careful to distinguish those two things. And that would, I think, reduce greatly what they think of as the credibility of evolution. Evolution can explain. That doesn't mean we've got the explanation. It means you can't prove me wrong because I can always make up a story. Well, does that mean you're right? Because you can make up stories? Not obviously. Making up stories doesn't mean you're right. It just means you haven't been proved wrong. It doesn't make you right. So that's what I would say. No, I haven't seen any explanation of that kind. Yes?
Why does Chazal say that it is worse to not see your good qualities than to ignore your flaws? That's what I've heard. That's what they've told me.
I would like to see the source. I'm not familiar with the idea. Certainly Chazal, I don't remember it in the Talmud. Let me try to think about what you're saying. It's worse to not see your good qualities than it is to not see your flaws, right? Well, not see or ignore, or are we talking about two different kinds of personal ignorance? We're saying this ignorance is worse than that ignorance? Okay, so then let me share with you a Gemara in Eruvin, which also has to be understood carefully. The Gemara says that there was a dispute of Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai for 2.5 years. Noach lo Adam shenivra, or lo Noach lo shenivra. Now, Noach is a hard word to translate, but it's something like man's creation was appropriate, effective, good, successful, happy. Man's creation was an overall positive thing or not an overall positive thing. And then, after 2.5 years, they took a vote, and the pessimistic version won out. Yes, man's overall creation is not Noach, it's not positive. So now, you read that Gemara, and you have a 6-year-old's knowledge of the book of Genesis, and you think, golly, isn't there a verse about this? Isn't there at the end of the 6th day of creation, God saw that all that he made, and behold, it was very good. Were Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai really discussing, shall we trust the Torah or shall we not trust the Torah? Is what the Torah says true or is what the Torah says false? Is that somebody? Oh, of course, if you believe in developmental Judaism, you think, well, they didn't have that verse. That verse was written later. Give me a break. So the question is, what were they discussing? So I saw in the name of Rosh Salanta the following. Of course, man's creation is a success. Nothing God does is a failure. Sorry. But can we see the success? Or can we not? Can we see in the way man lives and his capacities and his performances and his failures and his repairs, can we see that this is a success? Or can we not? That's something which you could ask. Of course it's successful, but can we see the success? And they had a difference of opinion, and then they came to the agreement that we cannot see the success. What difference does it make? So Rav Salanta says the following. If we could see how man's creation is successful, then we could use that as a model to improve ourselves, to be able to know what to strive for, what things to imitate, what things to reinforce. If we can't see that, then the way in which we improve is by fixing things that are broken, avoiding things that are negative, trying to root out evil. So where do you put the emphasis on your self-development? Obviously, improving the good is an improvement, and ridding yourself of the bad is also an improvement. They're both improvements. But where should the emphasis be? If you don't have a guidepost from the good, you don't have a picture of what success is like, it's hard to say that that's my guiding light for my development, because I haven't got it as something to learn from. And I still may be able to identify things that are definitely negative, and those I can. So now, let's try to apply that to what you quoted, which I would like to see inside. I'm not familiar with it. What would be worse, to be ignorant of your good qualities, or to be ignorant of your bad qualities? I'm not sure that's what you said it, but that's the way I hear what's going on. Two different types of ignorance. Well, ignorance of your good qualities would mean you don't know what to reinforce. You don't know what to build on. You don't know what to develop. You don't know what to lean on. Because if these are my good qualities, then I can trust them to guide me. If I'm ignorant of my of my bad qualities, then I don't know what to fix. I know what really needs fixing. Improving the good is definitely an improvement, but fixing the bad is more urgent usually. So in terms, and I see that now, it's going to be different from what I said before. It's not going to be a direct parallel to what I said from the Gemara and Erevin. So now ask yourself, in terms of moving forward, what will cripple you more? Not knowing you're good, or not knowing you're bad? So here, there's this is a perspective, a Hasidic perspective, which says that where should you start? When you know that you have certain good qualities which could be stronger, and you have certain bad qualities which need to be corrected, where should you start in your self-improvement? And in this, there's a famous verse from King David, Sur Me'ra v'aseh tov, turn away from evil and do good. If you read that, you could very well learn the first thing you need to do is confront your failures and detracting features, and then invest in doing the good. You could read it that way, but it's not required to read it that way. It's not required to read it that way. Because this order, turn away from evil and do good, doesn't have to be steps 1 and 2. Could be that that's steps 2 and 3, and here's how it goes. The first step is do good before you turn away from evil. That means the good will be incomplete, it will be blemished, but it's a good. It's an incomplete and blemished good. That would be the first step. Then use the strength that you gain from doing that incomplete good to face your detracting features and fix them. And then finally, stage 3, go back to doing good, now a pure good, because the detracting features are gone. So who says King David's verse is talking about stages 1 and 2? Maybe it's stages 2 and 3. So you say, well, now why would it be 2 and 3, Rabbi? Why shouldn't it be 1 and 2? And who told you? Well, I'll give you an example. 3 times a day we say in the Shemona Esrei, Hashivenu avinu l'sorasecha, korvenu malkeinu la'avorasecha, b'achzirenu b'shuva shleimu l'fanecha. Bring us back, our Father, to your Torah, and return us, our King, to your service. Bring us to your Torah, return us to your service. Isn't that doing good? Twice doing good. And the third is, help us do a complete tshuva to fix the bad. That's 3, hello, after you're doing good. So there's at least that blessing, which indicates that you should do the good first. Now, why should you do the good first? So I asked my Rebbe Zatzal many, many years ago, because I'm very, very old, What about self-examination, self-evaluation? Is that a good thing to do? It's called cheshbon hanefesh. And he said, yes, but with one condition. And you could do this daily, weekly, monthly, or once a year in Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Whenever you do it, when you're evaluating, you look at your record, pick out something good. Start with that. Look at it, polish it, dwell on it, bask in the glow of the good thing that you did. And then, having reinforced your self-image, basically, I'm good. Basically, I'm right. Then look at the things that are failures and look how to change them. The enemy here is yush, which is despair. The enemy is being so down on yourself that you fall into despair. Despair is the great enemy, both in the works of the Musar thought process and the Hasidic thought process, because despair robs you of all your energy. You simply give up, and then you're sunk. And that's exactly what the Satan wants. He wants you to be sunk. So he says, you're not really good, or you don't really mean it, or your motivation isn't pure, and everything you do is worthless, and stop pretending to be good. That's an argument that's designed to destroy you. And you have to learn to resist that. No, there was a poster that I saw once, a kid about 7 years old with an angry scowl on his face. He says, I know I'm somebody because God don't make junk. And that's right, God don't make junk. You're not junk. So so now, given this, the worst ignorance is not to know your strengths, not to know your good side. That's much worse than not knowing your failures. If you don't know your strengths, you have nothing to lean on, nothing to inspire you, and nothing to rely on in making steps forward. If you don't know your failures, so then you can still improve the things that you have that are good. You can still make progress. But if you don't know the good that's in you, the danger then is despair, and that just kills your spiritual life altogether.
So just correct me if I'm wrong. It's better a little bit, not saying you should, but it's better to be taking advantage of your good skills and not being depressed than to be like opposite.
If we're quoting it correctly, we're talking about two types of ignorance. Is it better to be? Is it worse? We're talking about which is worse, right? Is it worse to be ignorant of your good or ignorant of your bad? And I'm saying now, being ignorant of your good it puts you in danger of despair. Being ignorant of your bad means that your efforts to improve yourself won't be as efficient and as effective as they could have been. That's not nearly as bad as despair. Now, this might not be the only answer to the question. There could be other answers and other perspectives. But as I say, I don't know the original source, so I'm just speculating with what I know. Yeah.
I heard the idea that one should not rely on miracles. So where is the line between having emunah and bitachon and relying on a miracle?
This is a very, very tricky question. She's not supposed to rely on miracles, and yet believing and trusting in God, where's the line between them? So let me tell you something first, which is something you should, put in your pocket. Ein lamedei min haklalos. General rules in the Talmudic literature are not 100% without exceptions. General rules in the Talmudic literature are not without exceptions. You say, Rabbi, how could you say that? Who are you to say something like that? Well, I happen to be quoting Rabbi Yochanan, who was the editor of the Jerusalem Talmud, and this statement is recorded in the Talmud. And he went further than that. He said, not only mustn't you think that general rules are exceptionless, but even if the rule lists exceptions, so the rule says, all A's are B's except for PQ and R. So you think, okay, look, the author put in the exceptions, so surely all A's are B's except for PQ and R. Rabbi Yochanan said, no, that's not true either. There could be other exceptions that he didn't list. That means you expect that general rules will have exceptions. So what you raised as a kind of contradiction, and you're right to raise it, right? The answer can very well be that there are exceptions. And indeed, Rav Dessler has a very fundamental and shall I say, very broadly organized essay on trusting God and engaging in personal effort and initiative and responsibility. Bitachon and Hashtadlus, and he describes 5 levels of people. And the top level of people, which is a very small population, but this top level of people, because they experience the world as a divine production, can rely on miracles. They can. They can command miracles. And the statement that you shouldn't rely on miracles wasn't written for them. They're an exception to that statement. And they are on the top level of bitachon, of trusting God. And as you go down, you lose that. But then there are people who can do that. Now, I'll just say one more word, but you really have to read the essay. It's a very, very rich essay. Trusting God is a kind of, it's a state of mind. And it expresses itself on 3 dimensions. There's a belief involved, there's an emotion involved, and there's behavior involved. Now, if I ask, well, where's the root? What is it just ABC? You have to have all 3? Or is there a root, one that makes the other ones, is the root of the whole thing? The natural thought is, well, of course, it's a belief. The belief is that God's running the world. And because God's running the world, I'm more relaxed and don't feel I have to control it. That's my emotion. And then my behavior is, don't overdo the kind of efforts that you put into controlling the world. So it would be a belief that leads to an emotion and to a behavior. That's a very natural thought. Rav Dessler says it's wrong. Capital W. And he's following the Chovos Levavos, and he's following the Beis Levi Torah and others. The real essence of bitachon, he says, is the emotion. Shockingly. What? Emotion? Yeah. The feeling of, I don't have to worry. I don't have to feel that I'm under pressure to make things happen. I have to feel that way. I can accept what happens because what happens is under the control of one who's making it work the best way it could work. So Rav Dessler says, everything that you do with respect to the responsibility to trust God is to protect, enhance, and develop that emotion. So how much effort you put in depends upon what that effort will do for that emotion. And sometimes a lot of effort is too much, and sometimes a little effort is too little. Depends upon the circumstances and what the outcomes are. There's a long, elaborate discussion of it. So when you ask about miracles, the question will be, what effect do miracles have on that emotion of trust? And on the one hand, you think, well, if I see miracles, then it's easy for me to understand that God is running the world, and I will certainly trust Him without. It'll be the most biggest investment in my ability to trust Him. And the Dessler's observation is, the answer to that is yes or no. Yeah, you'll trust Him, but you won't come to trust Him in the way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants you to come to trust Him by doing it, by confronting nature, which looks like a blind, automatic, ungoverned machine, and seeing His hand in nature. That's how He wants you to come to this emotion. Not by being overwhelmed with the miracles that take place. And that's why there are those who say the generation that spent 40 years in the wilderness, in a certain sense, their spirituality was compromised, because the real goal was to go into the land of Israel, and the constant miracles that they had in the wilderness will stop, and they'll be doing agriculture and crafts and business and all the rest, and to see God's hand where it isn't visible miraculously. That's the challenge. And the exemplar of this success was Hanina ben Dosa, with the famous incident where one Friday afternoon, his daughter filled the menorah, or the lamps for Shabbos, and she ignited the wicks, and then she gave a cry and she said, "Oh my gosh, I made a mistake. I filled the lamps with vinegar instead of with oil." Hanina ben Dosa said the following words: "He who commands the oil to burn, he will command the vinegar to burn." And it did. But think about his words. He didn't say, oh, my dear daughter, I don't want you to be upset. There'll be a miracle and the vinegar will burn. He didn't say that. What he said was, he who commands the oil to burn will command the vinegar to burn. Why does oil burn? Why wouldn't vinegar burn? There's no difference between oil burning and vinegar burning. Because everything happens because the Kodesh Baruch Hu commands it to happen. It isn't as if oil has that nature and God's sleeping and on vacation. And from time to time he makes miracles, but the rest of the time things carry on by themselves. There is no such thing. God's activity fills the whole of the world, except for human free will. That being the case, from Rabbi Chanina Dos's point of view, the oil burning and the vinegar burning aren't different. You and I would look at the vinegar burning and we'd be inspired and overwhelmed. I'll tell my grandchildren. And for him, it doesn't make any difference. Why not tell your grandchildren that the oil burned? Why did the oil burn? Because the Kodesh Baruch Hu right in front of you is making the oil burn. That's how he saw the world. That's where his bitachon came from. It came from penetrating the guise of nature and seeing the hand of the Kodesh Baruch Hu. That's the way in which that emotion is supposed to be conquered. So for such a person who's doing that, this is level 2, who's working on penetrating nature, who's making progress in penetrating nature, says Rav Dessler, he'll never see miracles. Never. Because they'll distract him from the progress he's making in penetrating the guise of nature. That's level 2. Level 3, he says, is a person who sometimes he's struggling with the same problem, sometimes succeeding, sometimes failing, going up and down, and he may need miracles in order to save him from a defeat. So it's not a simple hierarchy. Level 1 can command miracles, level 2 will never see miracles, and level 3 will sometimes yes and sometimes no, depending upon the need of the person. So the relationship of miracle, there it's not depending on the miracle, but it's the appropriateness of seeing the miracle. So all of this is complex and subtle, and the bottom line is, whenever you see a general statement in the Talmudic literature, don't think of it as unexceptional. That is to say, without exceptions. The general rule is you should expect exceptions, and then what looks like a contradiction will just be, and say, by the way, you have this in the written Torah also. You have out-and-out contradictions in the written Torah. Verbally are contradictions. Will there be poor in the future? So one verse says, Efes ki lo yichayev yon, there will be no poor, and the other is there will not be lacking poor people. They're like 6 verses apart. So of course it means this is talking about one condition, that's talking about another condition. But verbally it looks like a contradiction. It's contradictory expression which splits different realities. That's what it does. Yeah, what's noch? Yeah.
Can you touch on the method of learning, absorbing information and having it come to fruition in your conscious mind as you go through life?
It's a very important question, a very deep question, partly psychological, which is going to be different for different people. I don't think that there's one formula, and you put it in a very interesting way. A method of learning in such a way that you'll be able to put it into practice. Now, we have a pair of statements in the Talmud which sort of say this in a very dramatic way. Someone who learns in order to teach will be given the ability to learn and teach. Someone who learns in order to practice will be given the ability to learn and to understand and to teach and to practice. So the ultimate goal is really to practice. The Maharal says in several places that the ultimate of learning is to be able to put it into practice. That's the highest level of learning. I'm going to say things for the recording now, because there's a pet idea of mine that I find is stressed enough, and it's contradicted in some places. The Chazal say that Judah's bones in his coffin in Egypt were rattling around when they took them out of Egypt because of something that he did, and he was being punished for it. His skeleton wasn't assembled. So Moses heard about this, And he prayed for him, and there was a stage-by-stage rehabilitation. And the first stage was the skeleton came together, and then he was able to enter into the yeshiva in heaven, so to speak, and then he was able to participate in the discussions. And the last stage, which was the finale of his rehabilitation, was his opinion was the opinion that was accepted in practice. So it wasn't the next to last stage where he had brilliant kashas and brilliant explanations and brilliant connections. No, it's where his view was the view that where the law was decided to be that way. When you think about it, what bigger success could you possibly have in learning than Jews serve their Creator according to your learning? What could be better than that? Yes, if you write a sefer and people study it, you're contributing to their Talmud Torah. Well, if you write laws for practice, you're also contributing to Talmud Torah, but they're going to serve God with those with your words. There's no bigger success than that. And you can quote me, and I know there's certain people who won't agree with me, but I think a lot of sources to this. So what you're saying is really gold. Now, I think this means you have to have a split consciousness or a double consciousness. When you're sitting and learning, you're doing a mitzvah. Right then and there, you're doing a mitzvah. But you have to appreciate that doing this mitzvah is, in essence, in order to be able to practice. And I'll give you a proof of it. The idea comes from Rav Hutner, but the background for it is universal. Let's say that you're sitting and learning, and there's a scream from outside, and somebody's drowning in a lake. Some Jew is drowning in a lake, and you're the only person who could save him. What should you do? The answer is very simple. The law is any mitzvah that only you can do, you must stop learning and do it. But now, going back to what you said about rules and having exceptions, but now there's a rule. And the rule is, ha'osik b'mitzvah patur min mitzvah. If I'm engaged in doing mitzvah A, I have no obligation to do mitzvah B. If mitzvah B presents itself while I'm doing A, I have no obligation to stop doing A and do B, even if B is a bigger mitzvah. Even if B is a bigger mitzvah, more important mitzvah. Ha'osik b'mitzvah patur min mitzvah. So now you say, well, don't we have a lot of literature on how important the mitzvah of Talmud Torah is? Yeah, we do. Don't we say in certain respects that Talmud Torah is the greatest of the mitzvos? Yeah, we do. We definitely do. So why doesn't the rule, ha'osik b'mitzvah patur min mitzvah, apply to Talmud Torah? Why don't you say, I'm learning Torah, I'm doing a mitzvah. Even if it were a lesser mitzvah. If I'm doing one mitzvah, I don't stop doing this mitzvah to do that mitzvah. I'm doing Talmud Torah, the greatest, or one of the greatest of the mitzvahs. Surely I shouldn't interrupt Talmud Torah in order to do another mitzvah. Why is it that the rule is I must interrupt? And the answer is, in a sense, this is an exception to the rule. We spoke before about exceptions. But it's built in because the mitzvah Talmud Torah, by its definition, is for the sake of doing. So that if you don't interrupt the Talmud Torah to do, you're contradicting the Talmud Torah that you're doing. It's sort of like saving money for a special need, and somebody comes along and says, so and so has no shoes. He said, well, but I'm working to get $300, and I haven't got all the $300 I need yet to get to the $300, which I'm going to save for a special need. Yeah, but he has need now. Hello, with $75 you can buy a pair of shoes. Why are you waiting to get the $300 for a special need when the special need comes now? So here, if you're learning Torah in order to do, so then of course, if something needs to be done and nobody else can do it, of course you stop learning Torah. The rule of ha'osik b'mitzvah patur mitzvah doesn't apply to Talmud Torah. So if you have that in mind, that you have a double orientation. Right now I'm doing a mitzvah. But this mitzvah is inherently, I don't want to be misunderstood, it's inherently to prepare me for the ability to do. Let me say it again, because I don't want to be misunderstood. Again, starting off. When I'm learning, I'm doing a mitzvah. The learning itself is doing a mitzvah. But also, inherently, the learning is for the sake of doing. But it's not that it's only learning for the sake of doing. No, because the learning itself is a mitzvah. Not just preparation for a mitzvah, not just what we call in Hebrew, hechsher mitzvah. No, it's a mitzvah on its own. But built into this mitzvah is a preparation for doing a mitzvah when the mitzvah comes about. But if you have that consciousness, that will help you a lot. If you keep in mind this idea, someone drowning in the lake, and you say, yeah, of course I would go and save him, not because you're a bleeding heart liberal, but because the Torah has that built into it, then you can try to keep this consciousness of the learning is something which prepares me. Now, learning can prepare you in a number of ways. You could be learning the laws of kashrus in the Talmud, and it teaches you how to eat kosher. You could also learn how to build your character. Do the people in the Talmud engage in ad hominem attacks, the way is so common today in political discourse and social discourse and all the rest? No. Do the people in the Talmud ever admit that they're wrong? All the time. Does the Talmud ever say that the people are refuted? All the time. So maybe objectivity and maybe less ego are important in my own development because that's what I see in the discussions in the Talmud. This could be a matter of practicality, not just in terms of the end of the discussion, but how many times do you change your mind? I must tell you, I get a letter from a fellow who's struggling with various problems, and one of his principles is never change your mind. I said, what? Never change your mind? If you change your mind, you're not reliable. People can't trust you. Why? Because if you said Q yesterday and you don't say Q today, well then who knows what you'll say tomorrow? Yeah. So I'll tell you what, I think it was the great economist Keynes who changed his mind about something, and a journalist says to him, 10 years ago, Professor Keynes, you said this, and now you're saying that. He said, that's true. I came across new data and new calculations, and so I changed my mind. What do you do, sir? When you come across new data, new calculations, you don't change your mind? Why are you so surprised I changed my mind? Right? So, if that's the case, if the Talmudic sages change their minds, I should think in terms of being prepared to change my mind. Because this kid's like 20 years old, right? He's planning that when he's 60, he'll still believe everything he believed at 20? That's horrible. That's horrible. I think of what I learned last year. Yesterday, I study with chavrusas who are really top-notch chavrusas, brilliant people. I learn things every day, and I change my mind every day because I'm intellectually alive. Because there's a lot to know, and there are a lot of places where you can get things imperfect. So, I think that may help. And indeed, you might even do this, like once a day, try to find something that you learned that day that you could put into practice. In one shot, just one shot in the day. Do that. If you do that consistently, then it'll become a habit, and then it'll become a habit thinking while you're learning, it'll become a habit. It's a very, very important observation. Ja, was noch? Last shot.
Is it achievable for all Jews to keep Torah and for all Goyim to keep the Noahide laws?
Is it achievable for all Jews to?
Keep Torah
Yes.
in the world, and for all Noahide, for all Goyims to keep Noahide laws?
I have no reason to think it's not achievable. Again, let's make clear. Let me get clear what exactly you're saying. You mean perfectly without any exceptions or any failures? No, I don't think that's achievable. But remember that failures, right? Failures can be repaired. That's what we said before. So I don't see any reason why it couldn't be. I think when the Mashiach comes, according to many descriptions, that's what it's going to be like. Because Umola kol ha'aretz de'as Hashem, the whole earth will be filled with knowledge of God. Everybody will understand the Torah is true. Everybody will understand who the Jewish people are, understand what their responsibilities are, and people will be, of course, they'll be struggling with challenges. There's still challenges, you know. Oh, but cheeseburgers are great. You know, snails are great. Ants are great. Yeah. But acknowledging and stating that as their goal, seeing that as their prime value in life, yes, I think that it certainly is. It is possible. Is it possible before the Mashiach comes? I don't see why not. I don't see why it would be impossible. I could be wrong, but I don't see it. Okay.